Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my overview of the Crust. So for those who want to cross it, when I do overviews on this channel, I just have a look at the first 2 hours of the game. That's the Steam refund window. Steam says you can make up your mind about whether you want to keep a game or not in that time, and I tend to agree. Broadly speaking, I'd say 20 hours in, you're not going to change your mind about how you felt. 2 hours in. So it's a short punchy video, I keep it around about 10 minutes. Give you the broad strokes info, and then you can make up your mind on your own. So this should be out in the next couple of days at the time of posting this. Straight out of the bat, is it worth your time, worth your money? I kind of think so, to be honest. I really like this. It depends if you're into this sort of thing. I personally have a bit more of a leaning to these kind of factory builder automation type things, especially when it's like interplanetary edge of frontiersmanship in space. You know, often this is represented in terraforming Mars type games, but in this case, it's more about, and arguably a little bit more of a closer touchstone, industrializing the moon. It's following the trend of this newer subgenre that I really love, probably my favorite sort of subgenre, which is where you have these builder type games, but they are entwined with a narrative through line. Think Frostpunk or Ixion, they're the really big swingers. And while it is early access, there seems to be a lot here, right? Not only are the basics worked out, but even in my 2 hours, you know, I feel like we're just starting to scratch the surface of some of the narrative. There are a few issues, but like, honestly, these will be worked out likely in early access, especially when people get their hands on them and that becomes their feedback. I might as well lead with those because I've just mentioned it. I'm not sure if it's a language barrier. It's a unique issue with some of the writing in that it's kind of actually unclear what you're agreeing to specifically. In 2 separate instances, the game has kind of given me a scenario where I can help one organization or another. One's more of, you know, an altruistic helping people that are in distress, and the other is, you know, like profit-based corporatism bad sort of thing, right? And the game kind of is a bit vague. It's very difficult to explain. It's not even that I'm necessarily avoiding spoilers, but it's like, it's not so black and white which one you're really picking. You mouse over them, one of them's complete, one of them's still work in progress. So I picked, you know, help the corporation, and then it was followed up by another text saying like, are you sure you want to do this? I think that's what it was saying. And this is why it's difficult for me to explain, because the way it was written was kind of poorly. And I feel like it might have been a backsy sort of thing. And I was like, well, yeah, I am sure. But I suspect it actually switched me to the other mission track by doing that. I'm sort of like, why would you put that dialogue box there? I don't understand the point. Just to have path left, path right. It's not that complicated. In a way, the devs have made it more complex than it needs to be there. Anyway, it's a small thing, but it was interesting because I don't think there's really any backsies in the campaign. Further to that, I was doing a mission where I recovered like a satellite or a relay or something after this disaster that befalls the moon that sort of kicks the whole thing off. And there's this question of whether I should delay telling them that I found resources there that I can harvest myself, because they won't know and they're not technically theirs. And it feels like it's trying really hard to create a moral conundrum, but it's just very kind of terrible at explaining what exactly is going on. Like, why would there be a supply cache at this location that they didn't know about that I could potentially take that's not illegal to take it, but maybe they wouldn't like it if I took it? Yeah, so I get what I think they're trying to do, but they're kind of doing it poorly. That's my only real major gripe with the game. Otherwise, it's a really good, you know, factory builder type game. You're working your way up to mine out regolith from an underground slice of your base view and, you know, process that into different materials. It's kind of unique in that, like, yes, you'll tap an ore pile that you can put an automated building on. It'll call it like silicon or iron or whatever, but it's not strictly that. What it is it's regolith that's heavy in that. So there's a processing layer that you don't necessarily see in this game, which is interesting because what you can do is just run the regolith, which is essentially just, you know, crushed rock pulled out of the ground. You can send that straight to a processor that'll turn that into building mats that are more like concrete based. However, if it's got a favored density, in fact, as far as I can tell, it always will. So say it's heavy in iron, you could send it to a different machine that will essentially extract the iron out, which then in turn can be turned into, ingots and stuff like that, more iron based. So it's kind of cool that you can just use them broadly as concrete, or you can specialize them in their actual weighted mineral type. You've got some drones cruising around doing a bit of your busy work and handling stuff. I had a bit of a look. I don't think you can actually manufacture any new ones, but you get them for doing kind of mission rewards. Some of the in-game advisors did warn me against that they're quite rare, so look after and be careful with them. So that's interesting that you have a sort of early worker economy because you build little charging stations, so it's got a little bit of surviving Mars in there. But you sort of look after these drones and that, but they seem to be kind of high value, dare I say, rare worker types. And there are buildings that you can convert the drones into different types of drones, so whether they're like a carrier drone or a mining drone, for example. So that's really interesting, actually, because usually, to be honest, being a worker in these kind of games is the lowest of the food chain. No one cares, and you just build a billion of them, and if they die, whatever. So it kind of flips it on its head a little bit there. I'm up to a point where I'm building out like living quarters, and it would seem that I'm going to get people to come onto the base. The story, such as it is, seems kind of cool. Like, it's involving me. Again, I'm a sci-fi kind of guy. I like this kind of what I would call hard sci-fi influenced, so it's not about aliens and bright blue laser guns or anything like that, It is that kind of modern-ish human industry taken to the moon. There's an incident, and essentially the moon is now kind of cut off, lost comms, lost production. And the way that they've put you into this industry is that it is already kind of in full swing, supplying contracts and all sorts of things back on Earth with aid. So immediately there are stakes, at least from a narrative perspective, that you need to rebuild everything, get it all up and running, because there is an existing back-end economy of people potentially starving and dying on Earth if you're not, following through. It's a clever setup. The one sort of stake, and again, the game is a bit slow to get going, which is good. That's fine. That suits me fine. But at the moment, there's no really sort of stakes in that doom conditions or anything like that. The one thing that there is that you go into the dark side of the moon for 2 weeks at a time, and then you go on a pure battery reserve. This is cool. I haven't really seen this before. And part of, your UI metrics that show you what, time of day and all the stats that are going on is the face of the moon. You can zoom out because you can do like expeditions and send rovers around, and they will actually run on solar panel, but when they go into the dark side, they go to battery, and then the battery will run out, and then they'll have to wait for the moon to come around. So it's very, very clever considering that aspect of a moon-based game. I'm not sure I've seen it before. So, and the metrics on that aren't fantastic to read out, so your base can run out. I guess you can see how much storage at any given time you have, and then you could probably work out, well, as long as I've got 2 weeks, I'm good. But then as soon as you start building out your factory, it's going to change that number and all that. So it's there, it's just not what you're normally used to. And so, yeah, you can run out of power. I've done it once, I think, because I had like a scanner building to try and scan for ore, and that uses a chunk of stored power. So it's a really clever gameplay loop that is kind of original, but fits very well. However, the consequence of running out of power is kind of non-existent at this point, other than the fact that your factory stops, and that's a pain in the ass, and you got to wait for the moon to come around. And I do wonder, because a lot of your little drones still have battery support, so you can still kind of keep building to a point when you run out of power. And again, I give the game 2 hours. That's the fair treatment. I feel like maybe that once you start bringing people onto the planet, then that sort of risk of losing power and potentially having people die will become a bit more antagonistic. Yeah, but I really like it so far. You got a bunch of little helper sidekicks talking to you, working through missions. I will say there's this chick, the assistant director or something like that, and she's essentially a pain in the ass Karen from HR. Like, her entire personality is being a sarcastic, antagonistic piece of shit. And, before the disaster happened, she was getting in cat fights with this dude there that was basically just trying to warn us, I can't let you land on the moon because we don't have enough power to support more infrastructure. So her reaction was to be an absolute cow to the dude, but then presumably he's dead or cut off or whatever, so now she's starting a cat fight with everyone else in your team. But I can't help but wonder if like the devs might be a little bit based in doing it on purpose, because her foil, her other side of it, is the dude that handles contracts, more of the corporate mouthpiece, and he's actually quite reasonable in everything he says. Like, you can fill out contracts and that, and he's like, that's my job. I have to find lucrative contracts for you to fill. That's literally my job. And she's like trying to say corporation bad and trying to, you know, she's trying to have a holier than thou attitude, and it just comes off like an absolute kind of bitch. But the reason I think it might be base is because this corporate dude's poking at her saying, it's all right, you know, with my bonus from this contract that comes through, I'll pay for your therapist. And I'm like, oh my God, sucked in. So I don't know, maybe the story continues to take the piss out of this chick for basically being the loser of the bunch and everyone else being interesting. But it still doesn't change the fact that I don't want to kind of deal with those sort of people in real life. Even if you're taking the piss, I'd probably rather not have a bloody HR person in my video game if possible. Just a thought. I think I see what they're doing. I think it's a misstep, but you know, whatever. It's their game, it's their narrative, go for it. It's not enough to wreck it, that's for sure. Anyway, game's really cool. I look forward to 1.0 and covering it proper. Team, might just leave it there for the time being. I'll catch you guys on the next one.